We are continuing our positional breakdowns on today's show. With me being out for vacation this week, I pre-filmed all of these videos last week, so hopefully by the time we get to the end of today's video, we're talking about those 2026 defensive line targets for Alabama. Nothing will have changed, but you never know. I just wanted to put that out there at the top of today's video. Hopefully nothing changes by the time we get to that. But we are breaking down the defensive line on today's video. And I think going into this season, there's going to be a lot of expectation of growth for Alabama's defensive line. You got a lot of guys coming back. Hopefully they can continue to develop and just be better than they were in 2024. So I want to hear from you guys down in the comment section of today's video. What defensive lineman for the Crimson Tide, let's just stick with interior and the guys at that bandit position, which defensive lineman will be the most impactful in 2025? What does impactful mean? I guess that's just up to you, but I want to hear from you guys down in the comment section. Now, we've been putting these out, the PFF rankings and the PFF quotes that they've, talked about during their position rankings. So we're going to continue that trend here, and they have Alabama as the number 2 defensive line in college football going into this season, which I'll be completely honest, I was a little bit surprised that they were this high. I really like the guys that we have in the room, but to be completely honest with you guys, around the country, I'm not really, watching all these other teams, watching their defensive line around the country. It really did surprise me that although Michigan did have multiple guys go off to the NFL, that they're still down there at number 6, but you can take it with a grain of salt, but, these guys watch the film. They've got Alabama right there behind Clemson at that number 2 spot. This is what Pro Football Focus's explanation was on why they put Alabama at number 2. They said both edge defenders, LT Overton and defensive tackle Tim Keenan, could have entered the 2025 NFL Draft, but decided to return to Tuscaloosa for another season, pushing the Crimson Tide's defensive line near the top of this list. Overton broke out at Alabama after transferring in from Texas A&M, ending his junior year as one of the 15 most valuable edge defenders in America, according to the Pro Football Focus's wins above average metric. He's my number 6 edge rusher in college football. You have Tim Keenan is third on my interior defenders list and was third amongst Power 4 defensive tackles with a 90.1 run defense grade last season. The only 2 ahead of him were Mason Graham and Walter Nolan, 2 top 20 picks in this past year's NFL Draft. The Crimson Tide also brought back 3 players who played 300 snaps on their defensive line last year in edge defender Jamarian Latham, edge defender Quay Russaw, and interior defender James Smith. All 3 earned at least a 65.0 PFF grade in 2024. Now, we're just going to stick with the regular defensive linemen, the bandits, the nose guards, and the defensive tackles. Don't really want to touch too much on the guys at Wolf. Obviously, Jamarian Latham is moving over to that Wolf spot, and then Quay Russaw also at that Wolf spot as well. I think my biggest couple of concerns with Alabama's defensive line this year is going to be the depth, and it's going to be the question marks in terms of, being able to be consistent in stopping the run. I think those things have been issues for Alabama in the past. Experience could end up being a little bit of a strength with LT Overton and Tim Keenan and James Smith all playing over 300 snaps last year. And then you also have guys that could break out like Jordan Renaud and Jeremiah Beaman as well. It does hurt, I think, that you lost a guy like Damon Payne Jr. going to Michigan in the transfer portal. Probably doesn't hurt too much that you lost Jaheim Otis last year just because he didn't play most of the season last for you anyways, and I guess there were some hard feelings about that. He said the coaching staff didn't mess with him. I don't know necessarily what that means, if it means they didn't like his, work ethic, or they didn't necessarily think he fit the system or not. Not real sure on that, but going into this season, I think Tim Keenan's going to be really, really good, and hopefully LT Overton, as we've talked about in the past, can really step it up and finish getting some of those sacks. As we'll touch on, he's a pressure machine, but being able to finish some of those plays is going to be really, really big for Alabama next season. So I want to hear from you guys at the pinned comment of today's video. What is your confidence level in Alabama's defensive line this year? Scale it for me 1 to 10, 1 on the low end, 10 on the high end. Get down there to the pinned comment. Let me know what you guys think. All right, breaking down some stats here with Tim Keenan and LT Overton. I think, like I said just a second ago, I think they're probably going to be your top 2 defensive linemen this year for Alabama. LT Overton last year, man, it's just insane. Every single time we pull up this graphic or the other graphic of LT Overton, just seeing there that he had 39 pressures to only 2 sacks. It was like he got to the backfield, he got right in front of the quarterback, and then just went baby giraffe legs, like didn't know what to do. It's kind of funny, but at the end of the day, you want him to be able to finish those plays. I think Tim Keenan, we read it just a second ago, his PFF run grade was 90.1. That is incredible. Also, those stops, that's really, really good for Alabama in terms of stopping the run. Hopefully, they can be consistent on that. I think one thing that makes me a little bit nervous with Alabama's defensive line is the, gaps that they have. They are so wide. I think that does hurt a little bit in terms of just being consistent, staying in your gaps in the run game. But, hey, who am I to question Kane Womack and his philosophies and everything like that? You got 2 guys here that should be really, really good for you. And I think you've got these 3 guys as well, Jeremiah Beaman, James Smith, and Jordan Renaud, who are going to step up this year as well for Alabama. James Smith, I think you got a lot of positive looks at him last year. Jordan Renaud really did step in terms of the pass rush and run defense. And then Jeremiah Beaman as well. I think during that Michigan game, you saw a lot of positive things from him as well. So a lot of this, as we'll touch on here on the back half of today's show, what Kane Womack said about Alabama's defensive line back during the springtime, really the biggest thing for them is going to be developing, because they went out there and they only added 1 player to the defensive line. So hopefully these guys are going to be able to step up for Alabama and play really, really well next year. All right, we'll continue on here in just a second, talking about some depth pieces for the Crimson Tide. But first, want to give a shout out to our friends over at Fanatics. You guys can get this Alabama football hat today. It is on sale. It is a massive sale right now. Was $25, now all the way down to $8, so do not miss out. It is that dry fit, performance type of material, so it'd keep you really cool during the summertime as well. Keep the sun out of your eyes, obviously. All you got to do is go to chatsports.com/DeBoer hat. I made it that link because it's the same exact hat that Kalen DeBoer wears on Saturdays. So go down there, get that sale, $8 right now for that hat. Just go to chatsports.com/DeBoer hat. I'll put that link down in the comment section and the description of today's video. All right, I touched down just a second ago that Alabama really only added 1 player in the transfer portal along the defensive line, and that was Kelby Collins from Florida. A couple of seasons ago, he was a SEC freshman or all SEC freshman team, and going into last year, I think they just really wanted to change his body and move his position a little bit, and really took a massive, massive step back. He lost a lot of playing time. So hopefully this season, they're kind of doing the same thing with him here, but they're kind of transitioning to where he can play that bandit role, or he can kind of play that, Jeremiah Beaman role, Jordan Renaud, whoever it is, on the interior for Alabama. Kane Womack said they wanted to put him inside and outside, and I think that's one thing that Kane Womack really does a lot of. It's using the versatility of these defensive linemen. If you go back and you watch, Alabama play last year, how many times was Tim Smith playing basically outside linebacker? He was outside the tackles rushing, and it's who am I to question what, Alabama's doing out there, but didn't really seem like the best utilization of talent, but, it is what it is. Hopefully Alabama can be consistent. The point there is that Kane Womack really does like to utilize guys in a lot of different ways. And one guy that can hopefully find his way into some playing time this year is going to be Keon Keeley. We've talked about him probably too much, to be honest with you, but it's notable. He's a former number 2 overall player in the 247 Sports Composite rankings. He's a big pickup for Alabama late in the process in that 2023 recruiting class as well. And, respect to him. He's stayed the course. He is, done the things that the coaching staffs have asked him to use. And coaching staffs, I use that plural because he signed with Nick Saban, but he stayed now with Kane Womack, Kalen DeBoer in this new Alabama coaching staff. So not a lot of guys that I think you can look to that are going to be willing to do that. And then you also got this behemoth of a dude in Steve Mbamua. That's definitely not how you say it, but until I hear it some other way, that's probably how I'm going to say it for now. I know Jimmy Stein is the only person who I have ever heard actually know how to say Steve Mbamua's name correctly there. But you look what he did in JUCO. You remember he technically was supposed to be in Alabama's recruiting class like 2 years ago, and then had to end up going to JUCO to get some extra credits and stuff like that. And he played pretty well in 9 games in JUCO, 46 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries, and 7 TFLs. I don't think you could really ask for much more. I don't know if he's going to be able to really contribute for Alabama this season, but we'll find out sooner or later because, like we said a second ago, the depth for Alabama is, I think, one of the biggest concerns going into this season along the defensive line. Make sure you guys are subscribed as well right here to the Alabama Football Report. Do not miss out. We have our watch parties for every single game. We are live here on the channel, so do not miss out on that. We do giveaways and a bunch of old fun things during our Alabama football watch party. So hit that subscribe button. We are trying to get to 26,000 subscribers now, I believe is what it is. So do not miss out. Hit that sub button, youtube.com/@RollTideTV. All right, 2 more guys that there's a real opportunity, I think, that they could play this year for Alabama is Edric Hill and Isaiah Faga. Which one is going to play more? Not real sure, but Edric Hill was a 4-star top 200 player in that 2023 class. Isaiah Faga, one of those stories where, he's lower in the rankings. He is a 3-star, number 60 defensive lineman in that 2024 class. But, defensive line and offensive line are kind of those position groups where it might take you a few years to actually be able to work your way into getting some playing time. And Edric Hill has only played 68 career snaps in 2 years. Isaiah Faga only played 8 snaps last year. 4 tackles between both of those guys. Edric Hill has all of those tackles. So, I think, Tim Keenan is probably not going to be playing, 65 snaps a game or whatever it ends up being. So somebody else is going to have to step up and be in the interior of that defensive line. Like we talked about, Kane Womack loves to use guys in different ways. Hopefully, we heard some positive things about these guys during the springtime, but not, overly, a lot of stuff about them by any means of the imagination. But it goes back to what Kane Womack said about Alabama's defensive line depth and why I kind of thought they were going to go out in the transfer portal and, target that defensive line really, really heavily. And they just really did not end up doing that. Kane Womack said on March 7th about Alabama's defensive line depth. He said, I don't know if I ever feel like I have enough depth on the interior. It's certainly an area that I think from a defensive standpoint, it's probably one of our biggest areas of depth concern. Development is the best recipe for that, but certainly we'll make sure that we address those needs in any way that we need to before the season. In my head, I immediately went to, they're going to go get a couple guys in the transfer portal. They only went and got Kelby Collins. So, in my opinion, it also seems like, those guys like Edric Hill and Isaiah Faga probably, did a little bit better. Same with Kelby Collins as well. And let's also not forget the guy that just signed in the 2025 recruiting class as well, London Simmons. Kind of same story there where he is very much lower ranked, but, man, this kid going into his senior season really, he lost a ton of weight, and he really did just look a whole lot better from his junior season to his senior season. Go throw on the film, man. 27 tackles for loss as a senior. Look, I get it. It's high school, but, dude, at the end of the day, 27 TFLs, 11.5 sacks. That's good no matter where you're playing. So whether it's going to be this year or it might be 2-3 years from now when we actually get an opportunity to see London Simmons, I am really excited about him. A couple months ago, you had some players calling him a diamond in the rough. So we'll see what happens there with London Simmons. And then you look at Alabama's potential 2026 recruiting class along the defensive line as well. You have Jamarian Matthews, Kamarian Johnson, J.J. Finch, and Nolan Wilson all already committed to Alabama's 2026 class. If that's already a really good haul, especially when you look at the film of those four guys. But then if you could add Anthony Jones, the number 16 overall player, another 5-star, probably your last 5-star if you land him in this class, man, I just really don't know how you couldn't be excited about this defensive line class going into, the 2026 recruiting cycle. So let me know down in the comment section. I guess technically, I'm filming this video on July 9th. So I guess there's technically a chance that Anthony Jones could surprise announce his commitment before this video actually goes out. But let me know what you guys think if it hasn't happened already. Will Alabama land Anthony Jones in their 2026 recruiting class? Type Y for yes or N for no. If it's already happened for some reason and Alabama does land him, just type a RTR or a tank down in the comment section as well.